Good news, Dr. Borris is back. And if you don't know who Dr. Borris is, I forgive you. How'd I do?
You did great, and thank you so much for inviting me. It's so great to be back here. And I do forgive you for getting me on TV so early this morning.
If I have to be up, everybody has to be, particularly with a parking lot full of zombies. I'll explain that later on. Here, you let me show the people the book. And this is one of the two books on forgiveness by Dr. Eileen Borris, with a foreword by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. All right, now listen, I know you're successful and you're highly respected. How did you pull that off?
Oh, let me tell you, it was a lot of my charm. No, actually, I work with the Tibetan government in exile, and I've given them trainings in conflict resolution, and I've had the privilege of actually having 6 audiences with His Holiness. So it was at the 6th training when I was giving the training, I was asked if I wanted to have a private audience with him. And so I, of course, said yes, and when I went to speak with him, I wanted to ask him to write the foreword, but I got too shy. And I leave, but that night, I had dinner with His Holiness's brother. My husband is Tibetan, and his sister is best friends with the younger brother's wife. So we're all good friends. And they knew I had an audience, so they said to me, how did it go? And I told them, and then I said, but you know, I wanted to ask about writing a foreword. And they laughed. They said, he already said yes. He knew you wanted to ask.
The Dalai Lama has gotten far too much credit for something that has to do primarily with Dr. Borris and your understanding of forgiveness. These days, it would seem that just domestically we have to think in terms of forgiving leaders for the way they treat one another.
Yes, yes.
You know, when you see the debates, you see people who just are not great examples of good behavior.
You know, I also had the good fortune of speaking to the United Nations General Assembly on forgiveness and the healing of nations. And when I spoke about that, in a sense I was chiding those leaders, saying, listen, people are ready to forgive. People don't want to continue conflict. They don't want pain and suffering, but they need leadership. And that I really chided those leaders, saying, you've got to step up to the plate. Because if you don't, other people will.
But then how do you say to the leaders of Israel and the Palestinian leaders, you have to forgive one another?
You don't start with that. You start with, do you want to continue the cycles of violence? And actually that's what political forgiveness is about. It's about really working with groups in conflict, and the groups decide, okay, this violence has to stop. And that's the commitment they make. And then they work through a process, because you cannot expect groups and leaders to let go of their anger like you do in a personal situation.
And on a deeply personal basis, outside of the world of the United Nations or political leadership, somebody out there right now today is going through a divorce.
Right.
And he and she find it impossible to forgive one another. Advise them in 1 minute now what to do, how to start.
How to start. 7 steps to forgiveness. Deal with your anger, talk about it, see what's underneath that anger. Begin to see the situation differently. Begin to walk in somebody else's shoes and understand their psychological landscape. Those are the first steps. Those are the steps in finding forgiveness. And actually, as I was looking at writing the first book and learned that process, I thought to myself, how can this be applied to the political arena? Which is what prompted me to start doing research to write the second book.
And the second book is Forgiveness and?
The Healing of Nations.
Yeah, and so once again, we go back to the difficulties that people seem to be having internationally, and a bad example to the rest of us.
When I work with international folks, I talk about this in terms of a triple focus skill set, that they have to do their inner work, which is understanding our emotions and being able to deal with that, how to work on an outer level in the community, and how to change structures of violence to structures of peace. And those are the necessary components in political forgiveness. the issue here is that when you take a look at peace processes, so many of them fail because they don't include these ingredients that are so necessary to get people to even be able to hear one another, to even consider working in analyzing conflict and moving forward.
What should we know about forgiveness coming up in the next little while as we observe the nations and as we observe our family?
What we need to really think about is our role in supporting a culture of forgiveness and to understand the power of forgiveness and how it really does have a healing effect with all the nations.
Finding Forgiveness is the first book, the Dalai Lama already said, and the second book is out now.
It's in process. We're still working on it. It's out soon, hopefully.
Forgiveness and the Healing of Nations. So why don't you come back when it comes out?
I would love to.
Dr. Borris, huh? Is there a better subject than forgiveness? If you say yes, well, I forgive you for not understanding. This is Pat McMahon. Stick around. Zombies coming up.